Hi, I'm Niamh Carroll. I'm a reporter at VideoWeek, and welcome to our panel on in-game advertising. In-play advertising is a really exciting new area. I think most of us know that when we're gaming, it's when we're most engaged with our screens. So if advertisers can capture us in that space without interrupting our user experience, I think it's going to be a win-win for publishers and advertisers. So before we get chatting all things in-play advertising, going to welcome our two great panelists who come from two companies who are, I think, leading the way in this area. So guys, if you want to introduce yourself, Gabrielle, maybe you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. My name's Gabrielle Heyman. I run ad sales for Zynga. We're one of the largest US mobile publishers. We make many, many games. We have around 170 million global people playing our games monthly. So it's been fun over here.
Hi, I'm Fran Petruzzelli. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Bidstack. We were one of the first players into the in-game in-play market, and we're kind of one of the guys leading this sector forward.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of in-play advertising, I wanted to define a little bit more what we mean when we talk about in-play or in-game advertising. Obviously, it's a growing space, but in-play advertising can mean different things in different games. So I wondered if you both wanted to define what you mean when we say in-play advertising and how you're using them. Fran, maybe if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our own definitions of it, and I'm sure Zynga have their own, but at the core of it, the way that we look at it, when we talk about in-play, we're usually talking about an advertising that's dynamically within the environment and feels and looks like it belongs there. So what that could mean is if you're talking about like a football game or a baseball game, you're talking about the hoardings around the pitch, you're talking about the stands, you're talking about the stuff you would expect to see in the real world. And then if you're talking about something like a Fortnite, we're probably talking more about the skins. So we're talking about people interacting with, with outfits, with weapon skins, whatever it happens to be. So we're looking for things that people are interacting with that feel and look like they're a part of the environment. That's what we see as in play. And then obviously there's things around that within the game itself, but that's the kind of core of what we look as in play.
Yeah, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think actually the IAB UK published something and they defined advertising around gaming really well. So they basically said there's in the game, there's around the game, and there's outside the game. So, in the game, I think would include what Fran just said, but also an in-game sponsorship. Around the game might be the ad breaks, so rewarded video or interstitial video. And then outside of the game, streaming, esports, things like that. So that's the broad strokes of what I would define.
Yeah, I think they're both great definitions to get us started. So in terms of ad trading, how do in-play ads work from an ad trading perspective? Can you use the standard AIB units when it comes to in-play advertising?
If we're talking about in-play, so I think we have really good definitions there. It's important that we define out those categories. So if we talk about rewarded video, that's obviously a predefined standard that can be traded. If we're talking about in-play, so billboards within the game environment, there is ways of buying it programmatically, traded programmatically, PMPs. At the moment, it's more along being shoehorned along the lines of display ads being put in there, those kind of metrics. The IAB hasn't carved out its own category yet, but all of us, included, but all our competitors as well, are pushing together in the same direction with the IAB to create a standard so that it's its own defined category, because this is a very new category to programmatic, and so it's important that we get the measurement, the metrics right before we open it up to everybody.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the IAB standards are really applicable to the around the game thing that we just said. So, Fran mentioned rewarded, but also interstitials, banners, all of those appear in many free to play mobile games, and they're standard units. What drives me a little batty is that like Google, for example, has their own standards for mobile ads and interstitial ads, and sometimes they don't completely sync with IAB standards. So I think there's still a little bit of growing up the collective industry needs to do with standardization, even in like the basic bread and butter media units.
Yeah. And then shifting slightly to talk about the end user perspective, I think the holy grail, if you will, for in-game advertising is to make advertising enjoyable, to not disrupt your gaming experience. So how do you both feel that the current ad formats are doing on this? And how have audiences reacted to in-play ads? Gabrielle, how have your audiences at Zynga reacted?
Well, so the ad experience is different depending on the game. And so interestingly, a game like Wars of Friends, you play a turn and then you see an interstitial ad. There's rewarded in that game too, but there is an ad after every turn. And the thing is that game has been like the number 1, 2, or 3 mobile game in America for a decade. And the consumer doesn't seem to mind because it's really, I think there's an awareness of people now that there's a value exchange, like this is a free service, but it's not a not-for-profit, like you have to, make money and be able to fund it. So yeah, and then we also recently acquired a Rollic, which is a hyper casual studio, which has a ton of ads in hyper casual. But the interesting thing is these games go to the top of the charts, and it doesn't seem to dissuade people either. And my kids play games, and I see how adept they are getting around the ads, and they know exactly like, oh, this is I don't know that they know that it's called an interstitial, but like this is a non-rewarded unit, this is a rewarded unit. They kind of know like what they want to do when and what experience to go for. Because a lot of these games now in hyper casual, they're giving people a choice, sort of like, do you want a reward for this? If not, you're going to be forced just like a skippable 5-second, and if yes, you're going to have a 30-second rewarded unit.
Yeah. Fran, what do you think that audiences make of in-play ads?
I think our experience with the publishers we've worked with has been generally pretty positive. One of the key things we're looking to do is trying to maintain the authenticity of the title, or at least maintain the standard of gameplay that the gamers are expecting. So if you're putting a skin in, it has to kind of match the skins already there, or at least feel like it's a part of the environment, and the gamers have to be comfortable. But most of the interaction we do, if it's not super authentic, so in a stadium like they would expect, it's usually like a rewarded system or a value exchange. So if somebody downloads a skin, they're usually downloading it because they want to play with it, and so there's always a reward there, and there's a value exchange. And if it's in a stadium, it usually looks and feels like it belongs there, so it adds to the authenticity of the game. So from our personal perspective, obviously we're not a publisher, we work agnostically with other publishers. We're always just trying to maintain the authenticity of the game, especially if it's not a free to play. It's really important as gamers that we don't affect the game environment, we don't affect the gamers' ability to interact with the gameplay, and that's really important for us. Authenticity is key.
Yeah, I would also.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to add that definitely gamers, like if you're talking about integrations or sponsorships or things like, they want a value exchange, and they like to see real world brands in their game, but they also like it to help propel their gameplay. So that's really important. I mean, rewarded video, or with a sponsorship, like if you're going to put a Starbucks in a game, you can't put it in the game without having a value exchange there, or else it's annoying, really. Now, billboards and things like that, I think that's just mimicking real life. So you don't necessarily need a reward for every billboard. Like if you're in a stadium, gamers want their games to look authentic. So it's not going to look authentic. Like they can see if it's fake ad, a fake ad that the game publisher just designed, or something real. So, there's all these, like, it's gray. There's all these different circumstances. There's so many different types of games, different types of genres, that you have to fit what's right for that title.
Yeah, I think it's about advertisers learning a little bit about the culture of the game, of that particular gamer, isn't it? And yeah, on that note of advertisers learning, do you think there's still work to do around advertisers understanding the opportunities that in-play ads specifically present, and what are the things that advertisers tend to like most about in-play ads, and what challenges have you found that have arisen?
I guess I'll take it first. Well, it's just so I've been in and out of the games business for a long time, but always in media. It's definitely more now than ever. Brands are aware that this is a mass market entertainment opportunity for them. But it's still interesting that there, certain stereotypes are very pervasive, like the 20-year-old guy in the parents' basement, like gaming, it's so much more broad than that. So I think once advertisers started looking at the the scale, the audiences available, it's actually a minority of younger people in mobile games, at least, like meaning super young, like it's very much, probably average 35-year-old skewing female type of audience. And it's been harder for them to deny this. But because the games business makes most, and I'm talking mobile specifically now because that is where Zynga's at, makes most of its money through in-app purchases, there has been like this kind of, it's not been like the TV business where, some broadcasters are fully ad supported and they're completely like coveting and making all of their ad tech be applicable for brand advertisers. In the games business, like the priorities really are and in-app purchases, which is driving the majority of the money. So I think that in a way, it's also the game business that hasn't as much courted brands too. So but it's definitely converging at this point, I think, and is reaching a peak of interest and like really doing campaigns.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are moving away. It's still a continual education process from that stereotype. And we're constantly trying to educate, provide data back. Look, you're engaging with a much wider audience. Some of our games have really good male female splits. The age categories are really spread out. It's not what you're expecting. It's not what you're stereotyping. And also I think we're driving that kind of that new perception. And I think it is getting through to the agencies now. You're seeing more and more gaming divisions crop up, that this is a place where you're capturing a really, really captivated audience that you almost can't get anywhere else. And I think that message is getting through, and you're starting to see more and more brands come to this space. So it's an exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, for advertisers looking to move in to the in-game space, what do you think it works best for? Does it work best for that short-term driving performance, or can it be more of a brand building, brand awareness exercise? What do you think, Fran?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's obviously a little bit more skewed. I mean, Zynga has a much wider portfolio, but from us specifically, we're mainly focused on brand, because most activations that take place in the game, I say 90% aren't to drive a conversion. They're not performance based. Obviously, you have exceptions if you talk about the rewarded systems sometimes. But generally speaking, we're very much a brand piece. Rewarded video, I'd call the exception to that. From our perspective, we work a little bit in that area. And then sometimes we drive value exchanges through like skins, but the majority of it is very much brand focused.
Gabrielle, what's your thoughts?
So the mobile gaming ecosystem is 100% driven by performance ads and mostly game UA. So, I mean, if you play any mobile game, you see that. My team does focus on brand, and, it's just, mobile's an interesting thing. Like, is it performance? Is it mid funnel? Is it top funnel? It's kind of everything. It's a chameleon. So there's a lot of opportunities for the brand metrics that brand clients are, driving towards. And it's really different from performance. And I got to say that, like, my job is kind of unique because my team, I partner with the network team that runs a lot of the performance side of the business, and commingling like brand needs with performance needs is really completely different. Like, brands want to increase awareness. Usually the KPIs on campaigns are, is it viewable? Is my moat, IAS and DV working? What's my on target percentage in terms of reaching a certain age, gender? you know, and basically brand awareness, favorability, and intent to purchase versus performance, which is just, you know, CPA oriented. And it's interesting being in an environment where you're, you know, there's kind of like three masters in terms of revenue. There's like the in-app purchase, which I said before, what features are we building to drive that? There's the performance side of the business, and then there's the brand side of the business.
And then picking up on what you've just said, Gabrielle, I think measurement is often raised as a real challenge, particularly when it comes to in-play ads. So how do you go about measuring in-play ads, and when, especially if we're talking about those billboards that people might be coming at from like different angles or different velocities, is it possible to standardize measurement when it comes to those ads?
From my perspective, we definitely think it's possible. It's just really getting all the competitors aligned on what that definition is. There was some definitions circulated in there. Once the IAB comes to a standard, there will be one in terms of capturing how much they've seen, how long they've seen it for. It's very much possible. Most of us have SDKs that sit within the publishers and they monitor the camera. So we can see the on-screen time, we can see the percentage on screen, we can have all that data coming through. And we're specifically working with Moat to kind of work through that IVT and that viewability to make sure that the advertisers are receiving the signals they expect to receive when they're buying this kind of inventory. It is a new industry, so we are very much carving out and creating that standard, but it's very close to getting there, and it is possible to measure and quantify it.
Gabrielle,
Yeah,
do you want to add anything?
Sorry, yeah. I mean, for standard units, it basically exists, you know. So for interstitials, rewarded video, banners, viewability is there. I will say that from my perspective, the mobile gaming industry, the majority of ad revenue is coming from performance ads and game performance ads, and their ad tech needs versus brand ad tech needs are different. So like you don't hear performance saying, what's viewability? What's my viewability score? And so what I've seen, for example, is when a lot, like you remember a year and a half ago when supply path optimization was like the buzzword, and all of these agencies were like, we're gonna only work, you know, we've narrowed down only 5 SSPs we'll work with. Those SSPs were like brand SSPs, and typically like even more web, like they came from like the web side of tech, and you know, everyone's doing all platforms now. But when you like start as a fundamental web player, the ad tech is not necessarily caught up to like mobile app. And so what I've seen is that there is kind of been a little bit of a gap that we've had to work really hard to bridge between like the brands using ad tech partners that weren't really built for mobile in-app. And so that's been a little bit of a hill to climb, and it's kind of whack-a-mole. Like generally speaking, it's working. But then, you know, I just heard like one example, IS doesn't work for pre-bid with viewability. It's just, you know what I mean? So there's always like strange little things that come up where you're kind of going back and like fixing the measurement. And, you know, the other thing I think is that a lot of measurement, honestly, has been like the big guys coming up with standards and a little bit using third parties that might be a little bit of a gray area of how much are they grading their own homework. So like Nielsen and Facebook, you know what I mean? And then Facebook being like a major contributor to how Nielsen was scoring age, gender, like, you know, these things are actually, the playing field here is being leveled with iOS 14, because a lot of these little ad tech things that like Facebook built with Nielsen, they're not working anymore and they have to be rebuilt in this new world order. So that was a lot of answers about measurement. It's a big subject.
We talk a lot here at VideoWeek about CTV. It's obviously a growing space. We're sort of seeing brands and advertisers flock towards the space. And then on-cloud gaming as well is becoming increasingly more popular, and advertising there. I wondered how you saw mobile gaming in particular, but I guess in-play game ads in general fitting in with that CTV landscape. Fran, I don't know if you just want to take that off.
Yeah, no, 100%. So the CTV stuff is really interesting for us. when you talk about console and PC, you're basically talking about someone playing in front of a TV, playing in front of in a very captive way, and so it's an interesting segue for what we do and a way to engage the gamer in a different format. So it's something we're paying very, very close attention to. And when we talk about like on cloud gaming as well, like we've been experimenting and we've done tests in those scenarios. And you know, as internet saturation increases and bandwidth increases, and we don't have latency issues all over the place, you might see one of those players start to engage more in those markets. And it's safe to say that we've been preparing for them for some time, and we've taken steps to ensure that we're tracking those markets as they evolve into the gaming sphere, as they go into console and PC, and how we can interact with them in those marketplaces using the technology that we've built. It's something we have a very, very close eye on.
And then Gabrielle, coming from a mobile perspective, obviously at Zynga, how do you see mobile gaming fitting in with CTV and that landscape?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the best kept secrets out there is the amount of video ads in games, and quality, viewable, full screen, gorgeous video ads. What's been interesting to me is that it feels like people leapt from, like, if you look at the kind of, you know, from TV to cable to, I guess, YouTube to Facebook video to CTV now, right? So it's been like, and there was a little bit of a obsession with audio too in the middle there. But you don't really hear a lot about games until this year, honestly. I feel like, you know, like I've been invited to so many more panels and press outreach and things like that now. But really, like, I remember going to the IAB annual leadership conference before the pandemic, the January of 2020, I guess. And it was like all CTV and very little games. And I think that somehow people have sort of forgotten about it. Now, is it because it's on a small device? You know, I don't know. The other interesting thing I think that just came up is when you look, there's an IAB video report, and it talks about how the majority of video is now going to be sold digitally, which includes CTV. Like, I think it was 56% or something versus linear TV. And then they break it out like this much by mobile, like this much, you know, desktop, this much CTV. And I asked them, hey, when you looked at the mobile thing, are you including games in that? And like, they're still investigating, because I think that when they talk about this is how much is being transacted on mobile, they're talking about me watching YouTube TV or Hulu on my phone, which I do all the time. So it's sort of like a blind spot in a way, but it shouldn't be at all. Video for my team, it's one of our big priorities. And in the grander scheme of things, when you look at how agencies and clients have bought in games, a lot of it has been done in the innovation bucket of budget. Like, let me do a sponsorship, an esports thing. But hardworking media, which is the vast majority of money out there, and obviously, like, being running ad sales, I kind of have a radar for many. That's where I'm really interested in growing, right? Is like having us, you know, one of the key places that brands go to when they have video ads. And the last thing I'll say about this is that I think that there is a little bit of a retraining people have to think about in terms of like quality. Because to me, like, when you see a game video ad, there's only one video ad. When you're watching CTV, you see 5 ads in a pod, you know, and you're sitting there like for 2.5 minutes being like, oh, I'm watching this on demand and I can't fast forward, whatever. But like, when you're in a game, like you were saying before, you're leaned in and you know, there's only one ad there. So you're really sticking out. So I think like brands need to see like, wow, this is an awesome platform for my video budget.
Yeah. And then finally, I'm going to ask you both to look into your crystal balls a little bit and talk about what the future holds for in-game advertising. We're seeing technologies like AR and VR become increasingly mainstreamed. What are in-play ads going to look like in a couple of years' time, or even as far as 5 years' time? Fran, do you want to kick us off on that?
Well, yeah, that's a real long horizon.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, AR and VR will start to creep in. AR especially, I can see just from the experimentation we've done and the stuff we've seen that you can really start to bring performance into it when you start talking about AR, just because of the dynamics of how that works. So you'll start to see that in-play performance, which isn't something that we've really seen that much of. So I think that will be a real thing that will come forward, and you'll see it on AR titles moving forward. And then in terms of where it's going, I think, you know, the open exchange, people will start to buy this. This will start to be segmented budgets for in-play. People will start to say, you know, assign a portion of our spend to engaging with that audience in that way. So as of right now, gaming is almost like an additional, like a bolt-on. And I think it will actually become part of the core of these agencies as we move forward.
Yeah, and then Gabrielle, what do you think the future holds for in-play ads?
I think it holds great things. It's definitely a growing segment. A month or so ago, Deloitte released their media trends report, and what it showed is that for Gen Z, their number one activity is playing games, and number 5 is watching TV and movies. So they, you know, reported on like from boomers to Gen X to Gen Y, Gen Z. And so like, you can no longer deny this. Like if you are a strategist, if you are looking at where your company is going and what audiences you need to reach, you need to have gaming be an important part of your plan. So, you know, and that's that. And then in terms of technology, I mean, we have 5G, like whenever there's new technologies that come out, you know, gaming typically has a really big kind of burst of creativity and technical advancement. So, you know, when you talk about 5 years, oh my God, who knows? It should be, I don't know, something awesome, I'm sure.
Yeah, who might have 6G by then, who knows?
Right.
Yeah, that's all we have time for now. It's been really great to chat with you both about in-game advertising. I think, as you both say, it's only going to get bigger from here, and it's definitely a space that we should be keeping an eye on. So thank you very much. You've both been really insightful.